it's an executive interview, and today I am excited to be joined by Lindsey Bengfort, with the managing director of healthcare in the U.S. for NTT Data. And Lindsey, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm looking forward to this conversation. I mean, you have a broad set of clients that you're working with all across the country. NTT Data covers so many services. In fact, just real quick, I mean, what are some of the typical projects that NTT Data is doing in the industry right now?
No, it's a great question, Bill. And if you had an hour, it would still probably take me a little longer to cover.
I was a huge client of your services because you guys acquired the Dell services that I had, and I worked with your boss PV back in the day. And my gosh, we used you for everything. So I would imagine you're still doing that and more.
And more, Bill. That's the interesting thing. So I'll kind of do a very short history lesson that provides the context into how we got into all of the things that we do today. So about 150 years ago, NTT was started in Japan. And it started out as really a telco company. And through World War II, continued to kind of build that very strong base. If you've ever heard of Docomo, it's the AT&T of Asia Pacific, right? That's part of our broader organization. But that's really where NTT started. And as they continued to grow over the 100 plus years, they got into data centers. So Dimension Data was a big acquisition that they had. They got into other services components in more EMEA and the EMEA and the APAC region, right? But they wanted to break into North America, and they were struggling to do that just organically. And so they started looking for different acquisitions they can make to help break into that North America space. There are two main acquisitions that happened over the last 25 years. One was Keen Consulting, you may have heard of. And the second was, as you just mentioned, Bill, Dell services, right? Which prior to that was actually Pro Systems. So a lot of your viewers are probably very familiar with Pro Systems. And so that was a major acquisition that NTT made just shy of 10 years ago. And they did it because of the large footprint we had specifically in the healthcare space. So we had a very large healthcare organization and footprint here, and that was really valuable to them. And so that was, again, one of the reasons that they acquired us. And I say us because that's the legacy that I came through the organization with. And so that encompasses now, right, to your question, what all do we do? So all of that traditional IT services of infrastructure, applications, data and analytics, security, consulting, high-end consulting, all the way through things like hardware, software reselling, right? So we've got a VAR as part of our organization. Any telecommunications we do. We're actually the third largest data center footprint in the world, right? So we can really span across everything. So again, if we were to do a deep dive, we'd be here a long time. But we really are truly, Bill, the only true end-to-end IT services provider on the planet. We don't traditionally use a lot of partners just because we have so much capability within our own organization.
All right, I want to talk to you about what's going on in the industry, but data center. I would assume you have NOCs, SOCs. Do you do nearshoring, offshoring?
We do, yeah. So we'll do nearshore, offshore, onshore. We're actually developing a new concept called no-shore, right? As we develop AI and we develop these solutions utilizing that type of technology. So we actually bucket it into 4 different buckets. And yeah, we do absolutely everything that you just mentioned, NOC, SOC, all things infrastructure, all things security. And then when we talk about healthcare specific, which I know you want to get into, we've got capabilities with EHR, specifically with Epic, revenue cycle management, clinical service desks, things that are very specific and tailored just to our healthcare clients. Wow.
Well, let's talk about what's going on in healthcare. Where do you find the conversations going these days? I'm going to leave it open ended because otherwise I'm going to steer this in a direction. What kind of conversations are you hearing out as you're meeting with your clients and talking with others in the industry?
So I bucket it, Bill, in 3 different categories in terms of what I day-to-day talk to about with healthcare clients. And one is financial anxiety, right? There's a ton of financial anxiety in our industry today. You've got regulations and new legislations going into practice now coming up in January, which has a lot of people worried, right? And then you just look at the cost of tech continuously on the rise. You look at the cost of labor continuously on the rise. Health systems are always being squeezed, and that pressure is only building, right? So we talk a lot about financial anxiety, and we talk a lot about tech anxiety, right? Especially through the lens of AI. Where is AI going? Am I too late? Am I too early? Is it real? Is it not real? Tons of anxiety and questions around how do we harness AI to drive meaningful value for an organization. And then the third bucket is just around security anxiety, right? We always say it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And that's especially true in healthcare. So we talk a lot about, is my security posture right? Where are my holes? What am I not seeing? What am I not thinking about? And those are the three key areas, Bill, that, again, we have conversations day in and day out, and we have solutions, right, that go into each of those areas. But at the end of the day, it's about how can we keep these three components at a minimum, right? So then they can be focused on the thing that actually matters, which is patient outcomes.
Lindsey, I'm going to agree with you 1,000%. That's what we're hearing in our meetings. Primarily primarily it's AI, and then it's the financial. So AI is happening in the context of the financial realities, the pressures on the top line, and the pressure on the bottom line as well. The third one is interesting. So I'm going to go in reverse order here. I'm going to start with security and then move backwards. Security is interesting to me because we had a security partner in one of our CIO meetings, and his comment to me was he was shocked that they didn't talk more about security. And I said, it's interesting to me because I don't think it has moved down in priority. I don't think it's moved anywhere other than of highest importance to most CIOs because they cannot afford to have a breach, or at least allow a breach to move laterally across their network. However, there's just, when financial realities are happening, it doesn't tend to be the primary conversation. Are we having that conversation in the context of the financials mostly, or are we seeing new attacks and new systems sort of emerge in this world of AI, or both?
So in my experience, it's actually has moved up that chain of conversation. So I would agree with you in that a year ago, 18 months ago, it was a little further down, and there wasn't as much excitement, we'll call it, around that particular topic. But I think with AI coming out like it has, and with Mythos happening and Project Glasswing, there's been this renewed sense of, hey, this is not only like a priority, but it's almost to the point now where this is table stakes, right? So it doesn't always get the explicit call outs that say AI does, or, I need a crazy amount of cost reduction. It's more like if you don't have a security positioning or a point of view, then I don't even want to talk to you, right? It feels like now everything we talk about, whether it's clinical service desk, whether it's RCM, whether it's Epic management, if security is not embedded in that in every aspect, then you're not even getting invited, right? You're not even going to be thought of as a legitimate partner. So it's table stakes today. But then you start to double click on that and you start to see, okay, with Mythos and Project Glasswing, there are extreme vulnerabilities that are out there in every major application, in every major software. And that whole project, which we are, some of our partners are directly involved in, so we're involved in some respect through that partnership, we're able to see what are some of these areas that organizations are going to need to harden here very shortly. So how do you prioritize that? So out of like Project Glasswing, right? If they come out with 500 different patches for a single critical application, right, that's running a hospital, then you're going to have to understand how to prioritize that. You have to understand how do I schedule that out? Because you can't have that application go down, right? So
Yep.
all of these things are areas of topic that we're hearing more and more of, and they're looking to partners like us and other partners in the marketplace to say, how can I fix my security posturing, right? There are always going to be holes and gaps, but how do I make sure I close those gaps as much as possible so I can avoid the worst case scenario, which are big, massive breaches?
Yeah, it's interesting as we talk about this. I think how we do patching cannot be considered like a one-off task anymore. It's got to be considered part of a comprehensive security strategy. And then the second is the thing that worries me a little bit, and this is going to sound silly, but it's the garage attacks. I mean, we know the nation states attack, we know that organized crime attacks and those kind of things, but it's the garage attacks. I mean, it wouldn't take much for me to right now go over there, hit a prompt, and say, "Hey, what are the local health systems for me?" Oh, it's this. It's like, all right, go see if you can get in and find something.
Yeah.
There's harnesses, but there's also open source models that I could start playing around with as well.
Absolutely. And those and the release of AI, even with with Mythos, right? They're not even releasing that to the public because it is so just dangerous in the hands of, like you said, people just in their garage, right? Wanting to mess around and see what they can do. But there are still very powerful models out there. And so harnessing AI for bad is still a very easy thing for bad actors to do, whether those, like you said, are large nation state bad actors or just local, regionalized, one-off, right?
But
bad
it's
actors.
also easy for us to utilize as well to help identify and harness and identify and shore up some of those holes. I
We
want
do,
to.
exactly.
We're not going to specifically talk about the financials, but we'll talk about
Yeah.
AI in this context as well. How so? Um, here's what I'm finding. What I'm finding is the use of AI is unevenly distributed across healthcare right now. We're seeing a majority of it is just coming through the existing partners. Oh, Workday has it, and ServiceNow has it, and Epic has it, and whatnot. And that in and of itself is probably a practice. Like, how do you implement these things in the context of a larger AI strategy? And then there's very few people, there's a lot of individuals, but there's very few organizations with a concerted strategy for how are we going to utilize AI and how are we thinking about agents. I find there's an onslaught of AI features coming in, but
Yeah.
not necessarily a holistic strategy for AI.
Yeah, no, it's a very valid point. I like to use the analogy of Band-Aids, right? You have a cut on your leg and you're just putting Band-Aid over Band-Aid over Band-Aid over Band-Aid, right? But you're not actually fixing the core problem. You probably need stitches or whatever it may be, right? And so when you just start layering these different technologies on top of each other, how do you see, like to your point, across the board, what's actually working, what's not working? Is it doing the right things? Is it not? Is it governable? Can I audit back what it's done? All of those components. And so you have to look at a full landscape and truly understand what are the functionalities for each and what are they actually doing. So I'll give you an example of something we're doing at NTT, and I'll give it to you through the lens of revenue cycle management. So we look at revenue cycle management as essentially 9 different phases, right? There are 9 phases everywhere from, patient registration and eligibility checks all the way through collections, right? And so there are different platforms and AI agents for each of those that a lot of different organizations sell in the market, right? But there isn't one that sits over the top and does exactly what you just said, which is functions as sort of the brain of all these different agents and all the different activities that they're taking across that spectrum. And so one of the things that we've developed is what we call Neurostat. And it is an intelligence layer that sits over top 9 different agents that have explicit instruction to go and make and perform actions in each of those areas. The difference is it's not just doing the one thing over and over and over. The brain's actually controlling it from end to end. And so it learns faster. It has more context. It's able to make decisions and know when to pull the human into the loop to make sure that you're able to not get stuck in any particular area of that rev cycle, right? And so by doing that, we're able to drive immense value and really help healthcare organizations combat what they're doing on the payer side, which is exactly that, right? And so we're harnessing AI, we're able to audit it, we're governing it, and we're doing it end to end, as opposed to, like you said, these kind of small pockets of AI here, AI there. And so we do that within RevCycle, but we're also doing that and expanding that into other areas of our business.
Yeah, this AI chief of staff, I think, is going to be one of the more an AI agent overseeing agents is going to be interesting, because what we're seeing in these newer models with these advances recently is their ability to check work becomes incredibly valuable, because it can find its own flaws. Like it used to be, we had to find the flaws and say, no, 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 you didn't quite understand. Now you have this chief of staff who's looking at everybody's work and going, no, 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 that's not right. Or thank you for that. I'm going to dish this over to this agent, which is an expert in our financials, and they're going to run that analysis. And so you have this separation of duties, which is what we do every day in healthcare. We have a separation of duties, and we have.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, what the things that we're doing is it's not necessarily agent to agent. The key differential of what some of the things we're doing is this concept of a brain, right? So it doesn't actually go and do anything, but it controls and it checks and it manages the agents, the AI agents that are actually going out and performing things.
Yep.
And so by having this brain and the ontology designed the way that it is, it's able to have inputs from multiple sources, not just data sources from a client, but also data sources from payers, right? From legislation that's being passed, and it can learn like that. And so when it makes a mistake and then we correct that mistake, it learns, right? And as things change, because things change all the time. Technology changes, legislation changes. As those things change, the brain is already plugged into that. It's already learning. And it keeps up to date. And so it's very, very interesting to watch that develop and get deployed out in the market.
So Lindsey, last question.
Yep.
Top 3 ways that health systems can reduce their costs today.
Well, okay, only 3. Yeah. The way I look at it, Bill, is it's in a pyramid. And at the bottom of that pyramid, for us, it's RevCycle for hospitals. Because not only can you drive out costs, but you can drive up revenue that then gives you other budget that you can then reinvest into other transformational projects. So I think revenue cycle becomes really your base to start from. And then it's really looking at the technology stack from an infrastructure and an application standpoint. In today's world, are you doing the right things? Do you want to be, say, owning your own data center? Or do you want to be focused on other more strategic initiatives and find a lower cost provider that can help you do that? Same goes for app rationalization. Every organization in a health system wants their own application. They like it, it's theirs, they're used to it, they don't want to change. So having the political capital and strength internally as an organization to say, nope, we're going to rationalize this down, we're going to standardize this and do it on infrastructure that makes sense. That's, I think, that next layer up. And then thirdly, just because I can only pick 3, I think it's then how do you harness that data? How do you harness that data to continue to unlock value? So how do you use your data from a data analytics standpoint, and then ultimately AI, how do you use that to drive more meaningful impact, more meaningful insight into your environment, into your patient population, into your clinic population? And how do you continue to find those areas to not just drive out costs, but to ensure that the patient experience and the patient outcomes don't get negatively impacted?
Lindsey, I want to thank you for your time. One of the things I've always appreciated about NTT Data is you have so many arrows in that quiver that you can just you can have extensive conversations and bring you guys in a lot of different areas. So I appreciate the work you're doing. I'm looking forward to catching up at the at our next event.
Yep, we'll see you there, Bill. Thanks a lot for the time.